Hello, everyone. That Weems guy here for another episode. And we are joined tonight by Sheriff. I have to say it. I'm a deputy, so I still have to refer to you as Sheriff, even though you're retired. Sheriff Jerry Parsley. How you doing tonight, sir?
Doing well.
Well, if you would introduce yourself to the audience.
My name is Jerry Parsley. I am the retired sheriff of Clark County, Illinois. I did my first 20 years, or actually my first 10 years as deputy, my second 10 years as a sergeant, and then I lost my mind and threw my hat in the ring and nobody threw it back out, and was elected to 4 terms as a sheriff there, retired at the end of 2018.
As we used to love to remind my sheriff when he would get mad about stuff, it's like, you went door to door and asked for this.
Yeah, probably twice.
Yeah. He was elected 7 times, so he did it a bunch. Now, I know you said Illinois, and Illinois automatically conjures up images of Chicago. There's a lot of Illinois that's nothing like Chicago.
Most of Illinois is not Chicago. I am downstate, right along I-70. I'm about, geographically, I'm about 8 miles a crow flies from Terre Haute, Indiana. Actually, I'm right along the interstate, I-70.
Right. So your area of Illinois would have more akin to Indiana than it would Chicago.
Yes, it would.
Right.
Yeah.
Completely different worlds.
Altogether different world.
Completely different
which is a good thing.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. I've been to the Chicagoland once, and I'm okay if I never go back.
Yeah. I don't care if I ever go back. I used to go up occasionally to catch a Cubs game, hit the park and ride in the south end of Chicago, ride the L up to Wrigley, and I'll never do that again unless things change, but it probably won't in my lifetime.
There you go. It's been 2 stadiums since I've been to a Braves game. If that tells you how long, and I live about an hour and a half from where they play.
Oh.
So I never saw a game in Turner Field, and of course I haven't been to the new place up in Marietta either. The last game that I saw in person, Fred McGriff hit a home run in the 10th inning in the old Fulton County Stadium.
That's been a while.
It has been a minute. I haven't watched a major league ball game since 2004. So
I like baseball.
Well, I haven't watched whatever year it was, early 2000s. There was talk of a strike that year. And I just said, I'm not going to get interested this year because I don't want to be upset if they go into a strike. And I didn't miss it. And so I just never have come back.
Yeah.
So there we go. Now, you were at the Gunsite alumni shoot this weekend. Is that correct?
Yep. Just finished up yesterday evening.
Would you explain to the audience what goes on at the alumni shoot?
The Gunsite alumni shoot, Mr. Cooper always described it as a family reunion interrupted by a little bit of gunfire. And that's about it. But it's turned into something pretty large. I talked to Ken Campbell this morning, and I think there were between 240 and 200 and high 240s, I think 240 people there. We got hit with the monsoon rain about an hour before closing time, right? We got hit about 3 o'clock, but there was ranges that kept going. And so it was a big deal. And then there's always a big barbecue afterwards. And there's several vendors that donate things to the gas match. And it's just a big family reunion, and everybody gets to shoot. The staff go and run 10 different matches. There's a little bit of thinking involved in it, but and then there's a whole bunch of side matches. Everybody kind of chips in their money, goes to a side match. You shoot. If you're the top shooter in that side match, there's a gun that usually somebody donates. A lot of the companies donate weapons, and they win that gun, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal for the instructors. We all donate our time to run the matches for the rest of our family, and it's a big deal, and everybody really has a good time. You get to see a lot of people that you may not have seen in 5 years. I've had students come up to me from back when I was working there as a provost that, I see a lot of people come and go, and especially with what I do at the academy, there's hundreds of them, and don't always. I remember faces normally, but names, I don't do very well with that anymore. So it's a good time. Good time.
When you and I first started having conversations about you coming on this show, I just want to set the stage for the audience is, we've had numerous shows on the evolution of the modern technique as it spread across the West Coast and the country. And we've talked with various firearms trainers on things that were taking place in different parts of the country. And I've expressed several times that I would love to hear from people that represent areas of the country that we haven't talked to. And because there have to be things that were going on that just people didn't write down. And they didn't publish, and so nobody knows about them. And lo and behold, you've answered that call.
Oh, wonderful!
But
also let's be honest, Steve, too. That I called you to have you talk to somebody else about it.
Right. And he's willing to talk. He just got something going on in his personal life right now that's getting in the way. But he's going to come on.
That'll still be a great conversation. Right. Trust me, it will.
Of course, I had a good phone conversation with him. And I'm looking forward to having him on the show, and we'll keep that a secret from when he arrives. And of course, it'll probably come out in this conversation anyway. So people just have to pay really good attention to that. So you're going to specifically address what was going on in the Midwest, and especially the modern technique.
Right. So probably, I think the largest police academy for municipal and county officers, and there's a couple of the smaller state agencies that send their people there for their basic school, and right now it's 14 weeks. I think this is going to be the last class we have this year, and it goes to 16 weeks starting 2023. But I went through the basic school in 1982, and it was all revolvers. I don't recall anybody in my basic class having a semi-auto pistol. And we were being taught the modern technique. I just didn't know it at the time, but we were, because my range master at the academy was a range master. And had it not been for him, I mean, I had heard of Jeff Cooper, but I'd never really paid a whole lot of attention, just to be honest. I was a young, dumb kid, and just trying to get a job and get through the school and be able to keep the job. So, but yeah, he was teaching modern technique then. And a lot of what we did, like I said, it was all revolver. But everybody goes on about the Weaver stance. Well, you've shot that in the foot or both feet by now, which is a good thing, because it's not what anybody thought it was. But our problem that I've come to realize then is most of the recruits that were in that class, we were not issued body armor. Richard Davis was going around the country shooting himself with a 44 Magnum, and we were all thinking, man, that'd be great to have some of that stuff, but they didn't buy it for us. And nobody that I can recall could afford it unless you were up in one of the burbs up by Chicago, and they issued armor, but none of us pumpkins down in the river bottom really ever got any armor. And the problem with that was, as we all know, you take a broadside shot under the armpit, because we were being taught at that time to blade really sharply, basically having your feet going one way and your body doing a right face to the other. We were really bladed off hard and really were driving that elbow down back into the rib cage. So it was, but then that's the way we were taught. You did what you were told to do. So unlike now, I might not feel like it.
Yeah.
So
when nobody does what they're told to.
Yes. Quite a contrast.
Would you please specify which academy this was? You mentioned the academy.
Yeah, it was the Police Training Institute at the University of Illinois. That is the oldest actually academy that is in the statutes of the state of Illinois, that's run. It started, I think, in 1955. I went through there, like I said, in 1982, and it has evolved a lot. When I went through, I think it was 10 weeks, and now it's going to be 16 here at the first year. So, but we went through a lot of transitions, and you don't see a revolver anymore. But we teach the modern technique still. We kind of went away from it for a while. I go back to Gunsite. I was at Gunsite the first time in 1990 for 250, and then went back for 499 in 1992, and did pretty well with both those classes. And so, learned a lot. Took that training back to our agency, but the academy kind of went, I don't know, I'll just use the word a little wonky for a little while. And then we finally, after I started going back and become a staff member at Gunsite, why I did my best to poke the real modern technique back into it with the reasoning of why we do it, or why we don't do it, why we do it. So it's kind of working out pretty well, because my predominant job there is working with the remedials. I separate them out at Firearms 4, which we have 15 firearms sessions of 4 hours each. And I break them out and take them off to another range and kind of reteach them. So works well.
All right. Now, what would your definition of the modern technique be?
Well, I'm an old school Gunsite guy. So I had to they've kind of evolved over the years. And when I went through my provost program, started out with Charlie McNeese as my first range master. And Charlie's an old school Gunsite guy. And I knew that it was going to be by the book, or I was going to get the book upside the head. And I did my best to fulfill that for him. And then had another one. My second RM was Bill Halverson. And Bill is really an old Gunsite guy. So didn't really have to change anything. And then Jay Tuttle was my last one. He was probably one of my sponsors, I know, to come on. But you always ask your RM kind of how you want it done, and that's how we'll do it. So they don't like surprises in the middle of a lecture to the class, so you try not to disappoint them there. So, but no, the modern technique really, like I said, it's evolved a little bit, but not a tremendous amount from what it was when I went through the first time in 1990. Mike Wadlick was my first range master. Never forgot Mike. Really made a big impression on me as a young kid. And I always wanted to go back, and I finally saved enough pennies working a couple jobs in the interim, and went back to 499 and had Russ Showers as the RM, and Master Chief Herschel Davis as one of my coaches. And Herschel and I, we still stay in contact now, and kind of funny because he's working at an academy up in the suburbs, and I go up there and recertify their MFIs, and lo and behold, there he is. And I knew he was coming, so I took a picture of him as my coach at 92, and I said, boy, how things have changed.
And man, this is such a small world.
It is when you get out in it. It really is.
It is. I've got a good friend in Oklahoma City that his family was very directly involved in the investigation of the Murrah federal courthouse bombing. And on the other hand, I've got a friend, a student from the Terre Haute area that worked at the Federal Corrections Institute there that guarded McVeigh right up until his execution.
I probably know that guy.
You probably do.
Yeah, I do.
And, so it's kind of, two people, two different parts of the country. I know them because of gun stuff. Tiffany Johnson brought that up recently about how she and I wouldn't know each other for wanting for guns and shooting and stuff. And it's like, I know these, this one family, and then there's other people on the other end, both connected at opposite ends of that whole incident, that they don't know each other, but I've met both of them through firearms training.
Right.
And, it's such a small community.
Yeah, but I have, it's a very awesome community.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, the Gunsite alumni match, it is true. With you are family when you go there, and you take any class there, you got family all over the country. They're a phone call away if you need something, I guarantee you, because I've already had that happen a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm asking about your definition of the modern technique is that people assign definitions to stuff in their head, even though they might not necessarily know what a term or technique, because I have been told as you've already alluded to, incorrectly what Weaver was
Mm-hmm.
for over 20 years. And then when I get back as to the original source as closely as I can, found out what I've been told all these years was not correct.
Yep, it wasn't. But who knew until
Right.
you really talk to somebody who knows.
Right.
But it was kind of funny. There was a pretty large poster of Jack Weaver shooting that went up on the block and got auctioned at the gas match auction. Of course, all that goes to the Jeff Cooper Legacy Foundation, and it's what people think Jack Weaver did. All they got to do, yep, that'd be the one.
Yep.
Yep.
But he's not shooting what everyone describes as the Weaver stance.
He's not. So I guess that kind of solves that.
Right. Well, somebody from the internet would respond to that. Like if he posted that picture on Instagram and called it Weaver, somebody would tell him that he's wrong about what Weaver is.
Well, and my grandpa always told me, he said, just because that guy says it, don't make it so.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I wonder if that's why there tend to be so many squabbles in the firearms community. While it is a small and close knit and very good, I think we tend to get squabbles because people, like I say, they assign a definition or what they think something is in their own mind, and then they argue from that standpoint, and the other person may be doing the same thing, and they're both using the same terminology, but they mean different things.
Right. And everybody thinks that Gunsite, they are just hard Weaver people.
Mhm.
I will say that's probably true at one time, but it isn't anymore. Because if somebody tries to make that argument, it's kind of, if you know, as Bill Jean says, if you know, you know.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things that we want you to fight in a balanced stance, something you can fight from. You don't really hear the I word and you don't hear the W word much. We'll kind of take a little bit of time to see how you do, then we'll adjust you according to your body type. But if you can fight standing up, we'll get you there. And if you come into it like that, then it's no bones. It's all good. But we don't really, nobody harps on anything like that anymore. We just want you to be balanced. So that way you can fight in any direction you need to go.
And I think that Colonel Cooper and Gunsite and the modern technique take such a beating in the modern gun culture discussions. It's just people just don't know what they're talking about.
Yep. And they've never been there.
Never been. And it's funny, the more and more research and learning that I do in everything we talk about here on this show and in the training and all, the more I come back to, Colonel Cooper figured out this stuff decades ago, and we're just proving it.
Yep. And Colonel Cooper wrote it all down.
Right.
That's what a lot of people don't do. They think they're going to remember it, and they don't, or it changes based on perspective over different events in your life. Things change. Mm-hmm. And but he wrote it all down and put it in a text, and we're still preaching from it now.
Right. And because he published, that's why we know him and his legacy.
Yep. Eloquent writer, very much.
Yeah. Back in the day when there was an editorial filter and you just couldn't go run to your cell phone and immediately get online.
Right.
Says a guy sitting in his kitchen broadcasting to the world right now.
Yeah.
Which always amuses me is that when people act like, because it used to be blogs and now it's podcasts and stuff, they act like it gives them some sense of authority. I'm like, nobody came to me and recruited me to do this. I just flipped a switch. Yeah, the fact that I put this out doesn't make me an authority on anything.
Right. Well, the technology world, I allow it to pass me by. Thank goodness my wife can do that, because she's the one that plugged this all together, or else I'd call you from a payphone if I could find one.
Yeah, that was our initial plan, as we were going to do this over the phone. And then
yeah, because I'm not a I don't know. Better just quit talking about that right now.
Right.
It'll go bad.
So if I remember correctly, the other techniques of the other phases of the modern technique was flash sight picture, compressed surprise break.
Yep.
Weaver, which is now called the balanced fighting stance.
For us, yep.
And then the other two are skipping right out of my head right now. What were the other two? There was 5 elements as described in the writing, right?
It's follow through is one of them. Another follow through. And there's a lot of people that tend to leave some of those things out because they don't understand. A, you got to identify your target. B, you got to get your sight lined up somewhere in that other sight on the back. And then you just don't mash the trigger and don't worry about it. Reset, reevaluate it. So it's if you just do those basic things, you're really not going to have a problem as long as you see it coming ahead of time before it runs over you.
Right. So recognizing that there's a problem is probably the biggest thing.
Job one, yes.
Yeah. Recognition, which is vastly more important than the speed of your presentation.
Yep. I hear you guys talk a lot about the presentation and that whole time clock thing. And I try to tell my recruits and tell people at the ranch that if you're paying attention, you'll already be 2 steps ahead of the fight. You just need to finish it if that's what it takes. But most people never see it coming. And then the best advice we always give you in the mindset lecture is the best fight you're in is one you're not at.
Right. You mentioned that you went through the Academy with a revolver. Which revolver were you using?
I started out with a 6-inch Model 28 Highway Patrolman Smith & Wesson. And if you couldn't hit them, you could bludgeon them to death with that because it's heavy, really heavy. But that was an awesome pistol. It was a good pistol, but it was big. But especially we're using full magnums in it. But it, but then, like I said, the only people that I remember around us was the Illinois State Police. They had the Model 39s, then kept transitioning up the dash numbers to 2 and 3, and then they went to the 400 series, and that didn't work so much for me. So I got with a 1911 and stayed with a 1911, and I'm still with a 1911. I might have another pistol or two, but since Sherry's in the room, I only really got 3 guns. So that's all we need to talk about that.
That's right. That's right. Were you allowed to use speed loaders then, or they're still mandating dump pouches or libs?
We started out with dump pouches. And then I thought it was a great big deal when we got speed strips you could put in your dump pouches. And then started out ended up getting a couple of speed loaders, and I run that stuff the first year. But then I had a good friend of mine that really took me under his wing and got me to shooting. His name was Ed Barr, and he took me bullseye shooting, and I got hooked on that 2700 pistol. And, he got me hooked on the 1911, and it's just been that way ever since.
Was that something were you mandated that you had to take a revolver through the academy? And then you switched?
It's whatever you had.
Okay.
But everybody just had revolvers. So, but it was a different animal because it's a little different loading, other than just dropping the magazine out, shoving one in it.
Right.
And then I had a buddy of mine that we were high school together, went into the border patrol. Those guys were still carrying loop cartridge carriers. And that was only for a little bit of tack loading. If you decided you were going to tack load, you fire a couple rounds or 3 rounds, you push your ejector rod up, the empty ones stay up, you pick them out, you get on your loop carrier, shove the next 2 or 3 in, or what are you going to do? But if you run it dry, then you use everything else. But and loop carrier is still a pretty good idea. I mean, we got back into revolver shooting and teaching at Gunsite, and it's picking up pretty well. Actually, we're offering one in Indiana next year. So it's a 3-day class. It's a revolver 150, but people are going back to them right after they pretty well are going to shoot that 10-round ban in California in the foot. I hope that judge does what he did before. So that'll work out well for them.
Hope so. I was designated the last 2 years as the revolver guy at TACCON by Tom Givens. So I was up to speed. I came into this at the very tail end of the revolver era in law enforcement.
Okay.
My academy was mixed. We had two agencies that were still revolver mandated for their personnel when I went through. My agent was not. We were automatics, but being into this, I soaked up as much of the revolver stuff as I could did in the academy, and then I went back and sought it and learned it, competed with the revolver a little bit in IDPA, and I've
Yep.
just tried to soak up as much of it as I can. You know, it's one of the things. The primary sources of that information are dwindling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they are. But I started out with that Model 28, and then I had a mentor of mine give me a Colt 38 special and 6-inch barrel, and I still use that pistol. It's got one of the better triggers of revolvers I ever had. So I still do my show and tell with my concealed carry class, and if any recruits want to see it, I'll bring it and we'll talk about it. But you know, it doesn't hurt anybody to know how to run one, or
Right.
better yet, how not to mess it up or what to do with it when you need to change it over. So it's all good.
Yeah, I went on a deep path of studying it because I just wanted to keep the information alive. And I wanted to get it from as many primary sources as I could before those sources were not available. And I'm fortunate that I've got Claude Warner nearby. I've got Tom Givens to always draw on, and some other people. And so I've taken as many revolver courses as I could, and I've developed some of my own from what I've learned and gathered and read and experimented with and trial and error. And to me, the speed loader thing, that's for the gun games. But just because I can't find any really documented instances of somebody actually getting a revolver reloaded in a close range gunfight. And so I've gone from I don't typically carry speed loaders anymore if I'm carrying my revolver, unless I'm in a duty gear and a ceremonial function.
Right.
I carry speed strips in my back pocket.
Yep. I always carried in my right front pocket, but you don't put anything else in that pocket.
Right.
You'll try to load your pocket knife.
Right. And I just gone to carrying this couple of speed strips, or usually just one in the back pocket. Then I'll put a couple of others where I can get to them later if I need to. And that one is, like you said, the tack load. Yeah, I can see that behind cover or something like that, maybe dropping a couple of the rounds in. And it's also kind of an homage to the state qual course for the cops when I came up. If you were shooting a revolver, you had to manually load 2 rounds into your gun on one of the courses of fire. And having seen that over and over and over again, I just like doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of the 1917 revolver. I might have some in my vault at home.
One of the three?
Maybe. But I'm always on a quest to find time correct moon clips. So I go scavenging at the gun show at Indy, usually trying to go to the old junk spots where you'll run across some moon clips. I like the 3-shot or the full 6. That way, if you're using 3, you make sure you get it set right, and you're firing the 3 rounds. And if you need to do a speed load, you just pick them right out of there. Works pretty well if you run it a few times and make sure it's going to work for you. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny if you look back, it's like even predating that era or the modern technique era, you know, how the technology dictated some of the stuff that was taught then. And then as technology changed, sometimes the lessons lag behind, and we're still teaching stuff from technology that wasn't as good as what we may have now. And example that my father had a World War II era MMP revolver.
Yeah.
And it was actually done for the British Army. It was in the other 38. Was it the 38-200? And that was later bored out. It came back to the United States after the war, was bored out so that it would accept 38 special, which is not a 200. There's a difference in the diameter.
Right.
If I remember correctly, it'll shoot 38 specials, but it's not a tack driver with 38 specials.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tack driver.
And I used to take that gun out and shoot it. And with the hammer forward and double action mode, you can't see the front sight.
Oh, really?
The hammer
box spur sticks up so high. Yeah.
It's got one of the old fish hook hammers on it, and it blocks the front sight. And
Yeah.
what was the doctrine then? You cocked the single action unless it was for like close in point shooting.
Yep.
Well, obviously, if that's what the equipment that the people have and that's what they're training on, they're not going to focus on the same things that we would focus on now.
Yep.
And
Yep.
people get wrapped up about Colonel Cooper and the 1911 and some of the scout rifle stuff and everything. Well, at the time that he was writing all that, that was the technology that was probably preferred.
Yeah, and it had a little bitty bump sights on it.
Right.
And until they got big, so you could see them, and then you did actually use them, then it kind of come around a little bit to where you really need to use them because it'll just make all the difference in the world. Of course, dots are the big thing now. I went to a dot instructor school at the academy because we didn't have anybody on staff. So I thought, for once in my life, maybe I'll get in on the front end of something here. So friend and I, we went to the instructor class and then took some other classes and then brought the information back to the academy. And, we got recruits showing up with really good stuff and have no clue how to use it because they don't have an instructor there, but by golly, they got themselves a dot.
Right.
So the world is all better now.
Right.
But I started asking them the questions that I ask them about, okay, who set this up for you? Is it zeroed? Where is it zeroed? What ammo did you zero with and what ammo did you bring for the recruit class of 1,500 rounds? So, and they go, I don't know.
Yep.
I go, awesome. We're going to work on that. But I'd rather get them like that than they get a bunch of garbage thrown at them that is just going to get them hurt because you don't look at the sights anymore. You look at the target. So,
yeah. So they're allowing basic cadets to use a dot there in Illinois.
Yes. But that's why, because I separate them out. I take them with me also. I got half of them on one sideline and the others on the other.
Right.
And I'll go back and forth with them and I'll give these guys the drills they need to do. But we make sure we zero them and make them understand what this dot is about. We have a lot of dots kind of coming loose and quitting, and maybe we had a time or two they fell off. But I enjoy the challenge of that. It's actually a lot of fun to me to see their facial expression whenever they start to understand it. It's like, oh man, this is great. It really is great now that I know. So, I mean, all we're talking about there is their life. So, and it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I asked that question because here in Georgia, they're not allowing cadets in the basic academy to use a dot.
Yeah, I'm not sure what other academies are doing, but I know what PTI is doing because I'm the one doing it. So, and I kind of take it serious. So.
Yeah, to me, I don't believe that the academy should be dictating agency gear choices.
Really shouldn't, and or policy.
Right.
Because I tell them that's their agency's problem. I'm teaching you how to use this because you brought it. And now it's up to you to go back and start asking them some questions, see what answer you get. And then usually when they do, we'll get some phone calls saying, can you help us out here? Well, sure we can. We'll help you out there and we'll give them some direction to go, but that's their decision, not ours.
Right. Like I said earlier, I went through an academy that had revolvers in use in the academy class. Well, they just made sure all the revolver guys were in one group together. Okay, I don't understand why we can't do that with dots and iron sights now. If we're having to split a class into different groups anyway, or different relays, we'll just make sure that happens.
Well, that's what I do. It's the easiest thing, unless I get a kid showing up that really knows the dot and can tell me what he's supposed to be doing. We'll let him stay in with the big group. But the rest of them that really don't, I'll separate them out when I do the remedials. And I'll have the remedials on one side and I'll have the dots on the other, and I'll work with them and tell them what I need of them. And then they start performing it. And then we go up and we read targets, and I make them tell me why they're doing their shot placement where it's at. They need to understand all this stuff. But some days it's a little difficult.
Yeah. And, I'm having a warring thing going on in my head right now because one, career survival thing is telling me not to say what I'm probably going to say anyway. And then the other is I know what the gun community that's not necessarily in the academy law enforcement training community is screaming at their device right now. And I'll address them first. As I try to talk myself out of saying what I really want to say. No, I'm just going to go right there. It's much more simple for an academy just to dictate everybody's going to go iron sights, because then they don't have to be good enough to do both.
Well, I believe and agree with what you're saying, but I guess that we're a little different, and we can respectfully disagree with each other, because now you're stepping on my feet.
No. I'm saying that from, I can see why an academy would say that. Everybody's going to go iron sights.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
My bad. I misunderstood what you're saying.
Right, because if you're going to allow dots and iron sights, that means your instructor cadre has to be able to teach both dots and iron sights.
Correct. Yeah, I misunderstood what you said.
Right.
No, I got it.
And that's that's going to get me in trouble, but it's okay. I stay in trouble most of the time because of my mouth anyway, and it's just not going to change.
Well, if you're comfortable with you, that's all that matters.
I don't know that they're necessarily comfortable with me. I'm just used to me.
Okay. Well, you got to live there.
Right.
You're the only one that has to live there.
Right. And to some extent for the individual firearms training world, is they tend to see things through that lens.
Yeah, they do. But to me, when we first dove into this, I mean, I put myself through the instructor class, and that's not a cheap venture.
Right.
But they're pretty supportive of about anything that we want to do, as long as we get together and kind of explain why it's important. And to me personally, I would rather them shoot the iron sights, learn that way, and then step up to the dot. But then it's a complete 180 on target focus or sight focus. Because when I was sheriff, I never let any of the guys use any kind of optics on their carbine. I made them learn it and prove to me that they could shoot it with the sights that come on it. Because at the end of the day, it'll be iron sights and cockroaches. It's all that's left. Everything else is going to break or fall off or just quit working. So, but here again, when you got young people who've never had a gun in their hands, I have a lot of them that come through that never shot a weapon. They're scared of it. They're scared of us because, I won't go any farther with that one. But we have to get, or at least I believe, that we have to give them every advantage to win when they're already behind at the beginning. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Because they're going to be looking at what's going to hurt them anyway. So why not just push the dot between them and then press? That is just, to me, is fairly simple. But target focused is a good thing, because if it's changing in the middle of it, you can see it changing instead of being glued to the front end of the pistol and maybe not see it change, and then things get a little cloudy. So,
so much of the dot though comes with the setup and the maintenance. And I think that's where we're going to run into more trouble than anything else with it.
That's where we have the biggest problem, is plates or direct mount, or just quality of dots, and everything's apt to take off on you or just quit. But we tell them don't bring a couple of certain dots because they won't last the first week, and that's been pretty well true to form. But the two biggies are Trigicon and Holosun, and but everything can fail. It's man-made. It just is what it is. So, but we do our best, especially with the whole adaptation of the plate, and just there's always something going to be failing. So,
yep. In a pistol mounted optic instructor course last week, which I shot left-handed because I'm still not back to being able to use my right-handed yet, I saw an optic fly off of a gun in an instructor level class.
Well, happens.
Right.
Better there.
Right. And
Lot better there.
it's the setup that they begin. And funny, I went to my truck and grabbed a spare pistol mounted optic pistol that I had with me and brought it so that guy could finish the rest of the class.
Yeah.
And it's funny, people on the internet, they want to say how I'm anti-dot. Well, okay. I have 4 optic mounted pistols there and was able to provide one for someone else to finish the class. Obviously, I'm not anti or wouldn't have that much invested in it. It wouldn't be at yet another class
With the dot.
With the dot. Because that's, as you're saying, I want to be where if I have a student that shows up with it, I have to be able to teach it and understand it.
That's a little tricky because people show up with some poop.
Right.
And and you wonder why in the world they made that decision. And then they, after about the first day or two, if it's a pretty intensive class, they wonder why they made that decision. But yeah, I always carry a bag of guns with me whenever I'm teaching anywhere because something's going to take poo, or a part's going to break, or it's going to wear out, or it's just a piece of junk to begin with.
Right. And it's one of the differences in teaching cops and private citizens is that if you're teaching a group of cops, the students are going to pretty much show up with serviceable gear. Not necessarily the best in all cases and not always serviceable. Pretty much they're going to show up with at least a respectable holster and a somewhat respectable quality duty gun and everything. And in the private sector, you don't know whatever's going to show up.
No, with your semi-auto pistols, magazines are a big deal. But between the academy and Gunsite, you've got a captured audience at the academy. They got to be there. You have clients that you're working for at Gunsite because they're coming there to learn a skill set, and that's our job to teach them. But they don't always look at the information that they get from the office first on what not to bring. And then we have a lot of folks that'll bring a lot of bad things that kind of get them in trouble or get them hurt. And there's a holster that we won't allow you to have on the line. At one time, we were told, make it inoperable, and then they can use it that way. But then we still had a couple bad things happen, little owie here and there. You figure that out on your own. But that's not even allowed anymore. We don't even let them have. We say you show up with that or some other piece of crap, head up to the pro shop, get a decent holster where you're not going to get hurt or get anybody else hurt that week, because it's a hard 5 days.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears back to the academy and you've gone through the academy, everything, and then what was going on in the Midwest? What drove the training in your area of the country throughout that time frame?
That's a hard one to answer because I can give you my guess, but I don't really know. But the Police Training Institute is where most of the municipal and county guys came to get trained as instructors to take back. And, we have a program that's called the Master Firearms Instructor Program it's a 3-class thing. And then you come back, it's a 3 40 or 44-hour weeks between instructor class, a tactics and strategy class, and a tactical firearms class. And the TAC class is a lot of shooting, a lot of moving, and it's a busy week. The instructor class is where we do our best to teach you to teach somebody else. So after we get the basic instruction over with that first part of that week, then we pair them up, and it's all coach pupil, and that's where they learn to polish off their I call mine my line of Blarney, but it's just we're helping them learn a process for them to teach other people. So it's I'll say an instructor trainer, but that really doesn't even fit it right either, in my mind. but we listen to your jargon. We try to smooth you up a little bit and kind of stay to the point. But it's a good class too. And you'll work with one of the other guys in the class, and then we'll have you switch after a couple hours, and you start working with somebody else, and you may know them and you may not know them. Because like I said, we go from the Wisconsin border to the Iowa border to the Indiana border to the Kentucky border, and Illinois is a long state. So we get them from all over the state. So it's we try to make them into the best we can before we get rid of them. We only got so long to do it, so we kind of boil it down to what's important. And then you have to pass different qualifications to get it before you're a state certified firearms instructor. And you're only really good to your own agency because you can't teach anybody else. You have to go through a whole nother process to be an instructor trainer, like what myself and the rest of the teaching cadre is at the Institute. And that's John Bowman come up with all that way back in the day. And we're trying to carry it on as best we can. It's evolving, and we've changed a few things to what's a lot more pertinent now than what it was in 1980. We've thrown a couple things in that we're going to start teaching recruits. And then we had a bunch of really good seasoned officers. We ran them through it this last week. The Tuesday before I left on Wednesday was the firearms thing, the tactics strategy, and we started running them through it. And I'm looking at the other instructor and I'm saying, I don't know about you, but this does not appear to be working to me. They're doing what we're telling them off the syllabus to do, but it's just not working right. And I don't know that we need to be doing this right now, because we got a bunch of guys out there that know what they're doing, and they all do because I've had them all in classes before. So I trust what they're doing. And, the other instructor looks at me, he says, dude, I'm glad you said that, because we don't need to be doing this. So we're going to keep having to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it until it works. But we had guys getting off their feet trying to take on two guys at 15 yards. And I looked at them and I go, fellas, any of you people ever heard of that whole Newhall thing? And they're looking at me like I got two heads. And I said, well, put it in your Google box and it'll tell you everything you need to know. Because I'm not explaining it to you now. That's your homework assignment. But I said, we don't need to be getting off our feet at 15 yards with people that can flank us, or we completely lose sight of them. Mm-hmm. So we need to be bailing out and getting away and creating distance. And so, I'll be honest, I mean, it's a trial and error thing. And, we kind of wondered if the guys, were going to give us kind of a smackdown on it. But I think in my mind, if we see something that in theory was going to work and then it didn't, that just lends a little credibility to the program. It's like, dude, we can't do this and we shouldn't be doing this. So we're going to stop it after 5 people of 20 and go, we're not going to do this anymore. This is not anything we need to be doing or you need to be doing. So we can't set them up for failure. But it was kind of a good, and for all practical purposes, I said, fellas, I appreciate your guinea pig run for us, because if you guys are having problems with this, most of you have been on 10, 12 years. We can't put people who have had this job for 2 weeks and expect them to get this, because they're not. They just, some lessons you got to learn the hard way, Lee, and you know that. Yeah. But you hope you don't get killed in the process. So we just pulled the plug on it. We're going to revamp it and keep working on it till we get it right. Now,
do firearms instructors in Illinois, do they have to complete the entire Master Firearms Instructor program before they're able to teach? Or is that something for like a continuing education for already existing instructors?
No, the MFI program actually is set up and has been from the get-go. It is 3 separate classes, but when you compile them all together and then come back and do an internship and teach on the line with the recruits, then you pass with a passing score, then that's what gives you your MFI. And you have to recertify and come back and do teach backs every 3 years. So you're going to stay pretty current. But with the whole COVID thing, that 3 years turned into 6. And I got one guy that came back and had been there for 7 years, and I go, okay, here's a book. You need to look at this book, and we need to talk about this book. because we've changed a lot in 7 years.
Mhm.
We don't discard magazines on a double feed clearance anymore. We try to keep that ammo. So, and that's, to me, that's been changed a long time. He was throwing it to the wind. So we don't do that. So, but then I said, well, you come back and we'll work it out. We'll make it happen. So, but yeah, you can take the initial firearms instructor class and you're good to go teach at your agency, but that's the limit.
Right.
You can't go outside your own fences. So, but then when you come back, then you still have to get certified, even if you're an MFI, through the state, through the Training and Standards Board to teach at an academy level or an instructor trainer position.
Okay. You know, two things about that I find interesting, and just 50 states, 50 different ways of doing things. You know, that one thing that strikes me from instructor side that I like is the emphasis on getting better at teaching individual students. Because most of what I see from the institutional firearms instructor school side is it's a 2-week class on learning how to administer course of fire, grade targets, tell you all about how all the liability ways you're going to get sued, etc. But there's little or no time spent on actually diagnosing, coaching, and teaching individual shooters. I had to go outside of law enforcement into the private sector world and the open enrollment world to really get a handle on that.
Well, we have a set of cards that we split them up 2 relays. You're the student and you're the coach. So you either get a blue card or a yellow card. And the guy running the line that day, he'll say, okay, the guys with the yellow cards, get your card out. I want you to do number 14. And we only give them one thing to mess up to see if the coach can catch it. And if they can't, we'll just go stand and bore a hole in him and never say a word until he's either more worried about what we're going to do or he finally finds it. But then after a while, we'll start compounding the problems. But it works pretty good. And then, you know, some of these guys, they don't catch it because they're not all that good themselves sometimes. So good enough is, which good enough is not. You need to be good-ish, but you can't be bad. So, but we kind of make them, and what I tell everybody when I'm doing that block of instruction is, look, you need to start at their feet, work your way to the top of their head, and tell us or tell him what he's doing wrong or what he can do better. And that's, but you've got to allow that personal perspective in there. So when we go through, and I'll kind of clean everybody up because I don't really like running the line. I like working the line and finding all these little bitty things that will make a shooter better or at least more competent. And then when you kind of bring it up, they go, I didn't even know I was doing that. I said, well, obviously, because you're still doing it. So, but and like I said, this has been going on at the MFI program. When I went through in 85 to get my MFI, I mean, I've been on the road a couple of years, 3 years maybe, got sent to school and don't remember the cards. I'm not going to say they weren't there, but I can't remember the cards then. But the emphasis was on teaching the new teacher to look for these things, to try to identify them, and then do whatever you need to do to fix them. And here again, personal perspective, but you know, we all know that, well, I'm going to say, okay, that's a dumb thing to say. We don't all know. But in my experience is when you look around, you have the subject matter, you have the information needs to get out there, but you either have somebody that has a teacher personality that people want to listen to. Because the first time I went through a class, I was teaching and I was doing my lecture part and I was doing a lot of hands-on with my lecture. Nobody said anything. I didn't get any facial expressions. I really didn't get anything. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to kill me in a little bit. Or they're all asleep. And then I give them a break and they're all coming up and wanting to dive back into the problem while they're on their break. And I go, no, we'll address that in a little bit. You need to take a break. That whole mind thing and the bottom thing, when you're sitting on it, it's a weird dynamic, but you got to get off of it every once in a while. And then you just don't know sometimes what they're thinking.
Right.
And I always say, listen, if you got something come to your mind, you got a question, you got to ask it, because probably 4 or 5 other people are. And it may be a new twist, because I've learned a couple things based on a question that I got that it's like, I never looked at that like that, but that's a good one. We'll have to factor that in, and maybe I can do a little bit better explaining it so that question doesn't arise. So, but
the best questions lead to the best answers.
If you think about them a little bit, if you don't, and then it gets kind of goofy. But I had really good teachers when I started copping, especially on the range. Had awesome guys, awesome range master. And then as I kind of progressed through things, I went to work teaching after I got my instructorship there through the mobile training team, which is a regional 9 county, I think 9 or 10 counties, mobile team 13, and started teaching the basic 40-hour qualification. And it's a week-long process. But when I started, it was 24 hours for me. So we started that, and then people just kept coming, and it is awesome. And we started doing a little bit of advanced stuff. And you may have heard of Clint Smith. Don't know whether you have or not, but I'll bet you have.
Yep.
He had a traveling road show back in the day out of Fort Wayne, and I got sent to school there with him and brought some stuff back. And then the whole Gunsite adventure for me, or pilgrimage, I guess is a better word for me, because I drank the Kool-Aid big time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's just for me and all the guys that, I'm just happy as I can be to be even with the bunch of the guys at Gunsite that I work with. So, I'm a very blessed person there. But it's just a constant, I think we've talked before, a constant searching for me to get better and to teach these kids better that absolutely know nothing at all about anything. And, you hooked me up with Lane. That was a good call for him and I both, because we're talking to each other about ourselves, and just so we kind of know the ground we're on together. He said, "Why are you calling me?" I said, "Because this guy named Weems told me to." And so he said, "Well, I need to be calling you. You've been longer than I have." And I go, "That's not comforting to me, but thank you for saying so." But I think it's a way we communicate with these new police officers.
Mm-hmm.
You can't communicate them like the old guys communicated to us. There may have been a whacking in the back of the calf or the back of the head, if just to make sure you were awake. You can't do that.
Right.
But it's a communication thing. That's the quest I'm on, is to better communicate. Because truthfully, Lee, and I've told you before, I know, or pretty sure I had, or I tell most everybody, said, listen, this whole teaching thing is just me BSing you into what I want you to do, and you do it. Right. That's all this is. As a very, very basic form, it's just me trying to BS you into doing what I want you to do. So I got to get better at talking and communicating and wanting them to want to do what I ask them to do. That's the thing I figured out between males and females, because we got a lot of gals coming through. You go on the line, you demonstrate a skill, and you talk them through the skill. The guys will do what you do, what they see you do, and the girls will do what you ask them to do. It's completely different. And only took me like a year or so to figure that out. But when I did, it's like, the light went on. And it got a lot easier for both of them and me, because I need to talk to them a little bit different. And I need to make sure that when I do a demonstration of a skill set, that I don't leave anything out. I do it slow enough they can see it. But if I talk the girls as I'm doing it, they'll do what I ask them to do. And it just got a little weird on me when that bell went off in my head saying, wow, I may have learned something today. But it did make it easier, honestly.
Yeah, you stumbled into there. What I was going to ask about is like the second thing with the program that impressed me was the recertification process that is built in requires an ongoing continuing education. And like here in my state, that's not required. As I went through the
Hmm.
firearms training school in 2003 is when I was initially certified as an instructor. I could have never sought out any other education or training in firearms and could still be teaching what I remembered from the firearms instructor school.
Mhm.
And just
So
doing that without any progression, ever getting any better, ever being exposed to new information, never evolving with technology, any of that.
or
And
just a better technique.
right. And
Yeah,
you
just a
touched
little
on
better
so much of
technique.
that very eloquently, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Well, that was a complete accident, I'm telling you.
Nah,
So
you
I'm
know
out
what
to
you're doing.
trip over anything.
Nah, you know exactly what you're doing.
But but with that whole program though, it used to be that we went through everything, we changed in that 3 years and covered everything else. And then go back in and you go out and you shoot a qualifying score of 430 out of 500. You have to shoot sharpshooter to pass the course.
Mhm.
But whenever I took it over, it's like, why are we not having them teach or do a teach back of a skill set? I don't know that these guys can teach anything. And I got that from Charlie McNeese, my first provost class, because he drugged me in, and right off the first day, in the first 30 minutes, he said, "Son, I don't know whether you can teach, and you're going to be doing a lot of teaching for me this week, because if you can't teach, we won't be having lunch together." So I paid attention after that. So it's like, why are we not having these guys do a skill set back? And so we started that, and some of these guys, you think they're going to have a heart attack there before they get up and do their little dog and pony show.
Yep.
But once they get going, I said, look, you're among friends that are going to be terrible critiquers on you, so just do your best, because they're going to tear you apart no matter what. But it does help, and we're just about to change that over because it was all dry inside. And with the next class recertification I do in December with the new class, or the recertifications, I get a class in December. We're going outside, and they're going to have to teach it back for live fire. So I bet that'll bunch up their britches whenever they go outside, and I tell them that because it'll be the first time. So it'll be fun for me. So they're only there for my amusement anyway. So it's okay.
Well, you mentioned a name that was very pivotal in setting up this whole MFI program. That was Mr. John Bowman.
Yep.
Would you take a moment to talk about him?
Oh, it's going to take more than a moment, but I'll be as brief
as much as you want. As much as you want.
No, but John made a huge impression on me. I rolled into class one day, and we're getting ready to start class, and he said, "Everybody sit down. Got some things I need to read to you." So we're sitting there, and I'm thinking this is going to be something important or, life-changing for me. And little did I know it really was, because he had just got his brand new off the press copy of Gunsite Gossip in the mail at the range. So we spent the first probably 40 minutes of him reading Mr. Cooper's thoughts for the month to the entire class. And it's like, oh man, this is awesome. I didn't really realize the significance that it would play for me, especially 40 years later. So it's like, he was a very dynamic teacher. We all get that instructor handle because it sounds pretty good, but at the end of the day, we're all teaching people to do things that we truly believe in our heart of hearts that is going to make a huge difference for them. And I do believe that. But John was very outspoken. And I don't know if you ever have a conversation with Jerry McCown. I bunk in the same house with Jerry a lot when I'm out there, and he's a huge mentor of mine. And we sit down at the table before school starts that day, and then that night when we get done at Gunsite, and I just get stories from Jerry. It's like, oh, dude, don't poop out on me. I want to keep going. I want to hear this. But yeah, we got to go to bed sometime. But John was a dynamic person. He was a provocative guy because if he thought it, you were going to hear it. And if he thought it, he would tell you why he thought it and why everybody else was wrong. And Jerry told me more than once, all Bowman had to do was go to the sconce and him and Jeff would be into it. And it's like, well, that's good to hear. but John was a good teacher, had become a really good mentor. And I don't say that I tried to emulate some things that John did because I haven't. But one thing he did tell me, he said, listen, if you're going to do this, you can't put them to sleep. They got to stay awake. So you just need to do what you need to do to keep their attention. And I don't know that I have much of a problem putting them to sleep. Still trying to talk them into doing some things they may not know they want to do, but they're going to do them one way or the other. But no, John, and I talk to John occasionally now. And I don't know how he rode the storm out down in Florida, but I'm hoping okay, because I don't think there was a whole lot of okay there. I think you either made it or the way it sounds, you didn't. But I hope his place wasn't damaged because we have friends that they have having property and they lived at Fort Myers quite a bit of the year. A couple of guys went to school with that are close friends of mine, and they pretty well were untouched, but a block up the street was just, it's level to the ground. Yeah. And good Lord he don't have to explain himself. He just does what he does, and you just have to hope the best for you. So, but no, John was just a fabulous teacher because you always got the how come to everything. That way, if you had a question, it was probably either a really dumb one, which we all say there are no dumb questions, but that's not necessarily true because occasionally there is a dumb. Mm-hmm. But he always tried to work out everything in his presentation that would leave you with everything you pretty well needed as long as you put it in practice. So that's what I tried to do and tried to kind of emulate some of the things that he did. But I don't get twisted up quite as much as he did, but he still got a fire in the belly. I know that. At least he did a couple of weeks ago. So, but then, here again, though, my time out there started with Mike Wadlick. Mike Wadlick was a huge, huge instructor out there. And just a nice guy. You just wanted to go out and work hard for him that week. That was in my basic 250 class. I think the other coach was Larry Larson, but he was gone half the time because he was working on the mausoleum behind the sconce. So we never seen him. He'd start the morning and then he'd disappear and he'd maybe come back to start the afternoon after lunch. And, there were a lot smaller classes there then. I think there may have been 10, maybe 12 of us, something like that. So, everybody was on the line together. But now we're running 2 full lines out there a lot. And you have a 250 class. I think maybe next week or the week after, there's a triple 250. That's a logistical nightmare for the guys is trying to get everything plugged in for everybody for the simulators indoor and outdoor and in the night shoots and things like that. But a lot of people come to Gunsite. A lot of people want to be there. They work hard. And I know they leave better than when they came. At least, the big thing is mindset there. A lot of places don't teach mindset. They just teach you to go do something, but they don't tell you why it's important to you. And you need to be paying attention just a little bit ahead of time. Just don't go to sleep. You'll be fine. So, but yeah, it's what changed my life. I can tell you that right now. So that's a good thing.
Is there anything you would like to talk about that I have failed to ask you about?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff we could probably talk about. I don't have anything in particular, but it's not a fun world out there anymore.
No.
And your mind is your biggest weapon, and your eyes and your ears. So don't take anything for granted is what I tell these recruits all the time. I said, your life has got to change because of this, because if it doesn't, you're going to be food and that's just somebody's going to eat you. And you're not even going to know you're not even going to know it before it's already over with. And then you realize you got a problem. It's too late. You're carrying, you got real people you deal with, you got real guns and real bullets. What could possibly go wrong with that? Right. So it's an important part of my life. And I've been having discussions with my wife. I don't know, I'm not an old guy by any means, but I'm not a young guy either. And I've done some goofy stuff that that hindsight thing, but I've learned a lot from it because I ain't dead yet. So I try to educate the young ones on my mistakes that could have got me killed pretty quick. And I lived through one, took care of the issue, not a big deal now. Well, that's not true. It is kind of a big deal now. I tried not to let it be, but I've got recruits that call me back and get with me when I'm at the academy. That I've got a couple now that did their job and took care of the problem, and I feel good about that. And the way I put my my guilt trip on these new instructors, Lee, is I said you owe them your best. You're taking other people's money to teach them. You owe them, and they deserve your best. Because if they go out and do something fabulous and they solve the problem, you're going to own a little piece of that. And they're always going to have a little piece of you with them. And if you were lazy and a slug and just do good enough and something happens to them, you better have enough conscience that you're going to own a piece of that too. And I try never, ever to lay down on, because I'm always trying to, we've talked in the past, always try to get that different angle, a little bit different wordage to get to some of these kids that don't know anything really about anything. They just don't have any life experience. But it's, I don't know, I hate to use the word, it's a passion for me, but I guess it is, because I still get kind of wrapped around the axle on some of that stuff. But I want them to succeed. I don't want them to have that bad day. It's going to be bad enough anyway. So I don't want them to have that bad day. So you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you do.
It is so hard to try to translate and impart to, especially like basic academy type or beginning type students, what the reality of it's going to look like. Because people tend to have, I guess, from TV and movies and everything or whatever, they've got this image in their mind of what a gunfight looks like, or what a fight for the life looks like. And while I've not
anything like that,
right, and while I've not actually been in an exchange of gunfire, I've been in quite a few situations where the guns were out, and everything, and it was waiting for the whistle to blow or the buzzer to go off. And it's they don't evolve the way that you picture them evolving.
No,
mind.
You haven't. I have, and it's over before you're thinking about it.
Right.
And if you train properly, you will remember certain things.
Yep.
And then you can train for things and work on things. And then when it comes down to it,
right,
some of that stuff doesn't happen.
Yep.
I didn't hear anything. I just felt the recoil and the buffer in my carbine racking against my shoulder. I could hear the buffer spring slamming back and going forward, slamming back and going forward. I'm thinking, I built this piece of crap ain't working.
Yep. And
then I'm looking out there, and it did work really well.
Yep.
But you can't, and it's different for everybody. But there's things that you can try to prepare for that are going to be different. But I guess that's why, I've had 4 or 5 instances in my life, and I use the words God taking care of a fool. Yep, that's me. Come out pretty fortunate. So, but I try to make sure they understand reality, and any preconceived notion they have about any of it is wrong. It's just wrong. So I guess maybe I kind of picked it up a little bit after that happened, about being a little more serious about particular things. But it's kind of hard to figure out how to reach some of these people. And that's my biggest challenge now, I think. And that's really, you know, when I talked to Lane, he goes, you know, he said, I'm a little closer to age to these people than you are. You know, because occasionally with some of them, I'm Sheriff Pappy to them, but that's okay. I'm good with it. But they really do. They listen and they work hard, and I appreciate their hard work. And I always tell them, I said, look, I know this is not easy for you, and we're teaching you to do something that by nature we shouldn't be doing, but it matters to me that you got somebody at home, and I'm just going to say it, that you're willing to kill to get back to, because at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to, if it's worst case. But, you know, I the first time I heard somebody say, I was doing a meth awareness thing at a library for a bunch of older ladies at a library in one of the towns in the county that I was sheriff in. And this one old gal, she decided she was just going to pop up and say, I'm telling you right now, Jerry, I'm willing to die to protect my kids. And before I even thought, I said, well, that's the stupidest damn thing I ever heard. And then all of a sudden I heard it out loud the same time they did. And it's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Yep.
And I said, and what I mean by that is this.
Yep.
If you die trying to protect them, you're not protecting them.
Yep.
You're sacrificing yourself, and then you hand them over willingly, in my mind. You got to be willing to kill or to do what you got to do to stop that problem from happening. Therefore, you truly are protecting your kids. Yep. So I threw a life jacket on as quick as I could, and she come up and gave me a hug later, so I knew she wasn't mad at me. But it's like, oh, dude, you got to fix that. You can't do that anymore. Yeah, I thought I just shot myself in the foot. So, but that's at the end of the day, that's what it is. You got to be willing to kill to get back to the people you love that love you.
Right. And you know that the context just changes. Well, not necessarily, I guess the historical context changes so quickly, or the time frame context changes so quickly. I was teaching a carbine class to our agency earlier this year on the 25th anniversary of the North Hollywood shootout. Okay, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
But to cops that are 30 and younger, or 35 and younger, you know, they were 10 years old when it happened.
Yeah, or go back to the Miami shootout. It's another
right. And you know, but I'm now on the line with my, you know, the guys, today is the 25th anniversary of the North Hollywood shootout, and I got blank looks back at me.
I believe it.
You know, and it's just okay. Well, I've got to find a way to communicate to these guys, you know, what I'm talking about here, because they don't have that frame of reference.
Yeah, but I tell all the kids, you know, I go in and we give our instructor intros, and, you know, I tell them I'm a range master at Gunsite, and I said, any of you ever heard of Gunsite? And once in a while I'll have some Marines, they know about Gunsite. You know, there's Gunsite is just lousy with Marines of one rank or another. Right. So they understand a little bit because some of their training came from Gunsite. But I said, okay, all you people, get on your Google box, put in Gunsite, and just that's all you put, and you hit the go button. And I get a few chuckles because I try to be as techno ignorant as I can. It's just my way of letting them have a little bit of an upper hand for me, because all they can use is their thumbs. Therefore, they have no purpose for their fingers unless they're picking their nose. Yeah. So I can't do my thumbs. So, but I blend in a lot of humor, and I'll pick on a couple of them a little bit in a good-natured way, but always turn it into a training point. And I said, and this is why it's important to you that you understand this, because hopefully it'll keep you from getting dead. So, but we have pretty good success, and knock on wood, I've been at the academy. I was there 18 years in May, and I took over the remedial program probably 10 years ago. And I have not lost a recruit to the basic state qualification. Can you hear that knocking? That's on wood.
Yes, sir.
Yet. And I come real close this last class, but I'll tell you, I said, boys, just work on the basics. Do
Yep.
this, and this. Don't think about anything else. These are the only three things you do.
Yep.
And for some reason, the Almighty was smiling on us all that day, and they passed it. So
There you go. There you go. You mentioned Lane a couple of times. I'm just going to tell you that's Lane Thayer.
Yep.
Daryl went out there. Lane actually was in Dave Spalding's final class through his business this past week. Because he's always out there pushing through and trying to learn more and get better as well. And I just wanted to, you talked about trying to teach the younger generations. Well, Dave has been a guy that's been a mentor to me. And I'm happy for Lane to get out there. And I just want to close out tonight, or before we close out tonight, just taking a moment to pay homage to Dave Spalding and everything that he's meant to me and everything that he's meant to the firearms community. Dave wrapped up his handgun combatives business. He's dissolved the LLC. He just taught the last class, through the LLC. Dave's still going to teach. He's just not going to run a business.
Sure. So, Dave Spalding is a huge icon in this industry or sport, however you want to look at it. But there's a lot of guys that I know I probably won't get to do, but I'm trying to pick one off a year now. Yeah. But since you're paying homage to him, I've got to finish up with me. This past May, I got the word that I was going to be checking out for Range Master at Gunsite, which is a huge deal because my whole plan was to be the oldest living coach out there. But that didn't work out for me. But I, through however it was, Ed Head got assigned the proctor for me, and I proctored under Ed Head for my Range Master. And out there we call doing your check ride. That was a big shock because I coached for him a couple of times last year. Awesome man, a very good, talk about a mentor, because when I was coaching for him, we'd sit down and chit chat a little bit. And he told me, he said, you're probably going to need some of this. So you need to remember some of this here for the next 3 years for you, because you're probably going to want to bump up the food chain just a little bit. But he said, there's some things you need to remember. And then lo and behold, he gets assigned me, and I was the last check ride he did for a Range Master at Gunsite. And we wish him Godspeed. They're going to have a memorial for him, I think, next Saturday on the 8th at Gunsite in the classroom. And that was a little bit of shock because I sure did not expect that. But you can't say enough about some of these guys who have devoted 30 years to teaching the modern technique, to teaching it Jeff Cooper's way, but yet having enough foresight to be able to understand that it has to evolve, it has to grow, and there's just certain things when they become better. There's a little bit of good spirited sparring at a Range Master conference whenever they have them. They had this one this past year, January, and a few things come out of that changed. And I think, in my opinion, which doesn't mean anything to anybody but me, some better things come out of it for the modern technique, because I don't know that the modern technique has an expiration date on it. It continues to be modern in the time that we're in, as long as it's working. And it doesn't have a die date on it, in my opinion. But I've had some awesome guys out there that have just taken the time with me or for me, and they don't have to, but they just have. And some of them are younger than I am, and that's okay. I mean, they've got experience level as much as mine in different places. I mean, good gosh, we're all over the country. I mean, but I'll tell you, Lee, it's a when something becomes your life, or at least to me, I have to understand for me that it'll never be done until you know, I go meet some of the old guys some other place.
Yep.
So, but we all, if we're going to be a teacher, we need to take the responsibility to teach and to do it right. So,
yeah, I'd never met Ed in person. We were Facebook friends, you know, and in several different Facebook groups. There was a project that I was working on here. He posted some pictures or something in writing, and he was actually working on the same project, you know, on the other side of the country. And I just sent him a message of like, hey, I saw that you're working on this one thing, and I'm working on it here. Would you mind answering a few questions? And we bounced stuff across, you know, what are you seeing with this and everything else? And I appreciated him taking the time to do that, because I'm just, you know, some electrons coming on his phone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, he took time with me. But then he kind of left me on my own for that week, and I got nothing from him until the end. And it's like, oh man. And Jay Tuttle was also a coach in that class, and Jay Tuttle has been a huge mentor of mine too. But I said, Jay, am I just messing this completely up? Ed hadn't said a word to me yet. He goes, better just count that as an okay thing right now, because if you did it wrong, you know. He said you'd be off to the side range having a sidebar with him, and probably we'd all be hearing it. So I just took that silence as an okay thing. And then so he finally told me, he said, you did good, you're all right, don't worry about it. So I'll take that as a pat on the head anytime.
Well, there you go.
He'll be missed. He will be, because I would love to know just the things that he forgot about this. I really would. Yeah.
Well, Sheriff, I thank you for taking out the time on this evening to sit down and have this chat. Very glad we finally got to do this, you know, for everyone else to hear. We've had these conversations, but everybody else will finally get to see it. And thank you to your lovely wife for allowing you to do this tonight, and for setting up everything. So thank you to her. And anything you would like to say in closing?
No, I think we covered it, but just, you know, you can't stop. It never stops, and we can't stop and let it pass us if you're going to do it. So, you know, I don't know when my last time's coming, and it really doesn't matter. I'll know it when it happens. But until that happens, I'm digging in with both feet on it. I'm going to try to get better with everyone and try to learn more from other people that are doing the same thing. But reach out to younger people, because they're a little bit different mindset of things. And that's what I got to allow myself to do, is just, but you helped me out with that with Lane, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll be communicating more as time goes. And then one of these days I'd like to just meet up with a guy somewhere, but yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your time, and thank you to your wife for allowing you to do this tonight. And to the audience, we thank you for your time, because we know that is your biggest asset. And thank you for choosing to spend it with us.